I'm excited to finally be sitting down and filming this. It is January 23rd, but we are still going to be talking about my favorite reads of 2025. It was actually pretty easy for me to narrow this down to 10. I read 50 books last year, and these are not in order. The only ones that are in order are my top three. My top three are my top three reads, but the rest of them are not in order. We have a mix. We have some nonfiction on the list. I think we have 2 nonfiction books. Wow. We have nonfiction, we have translated fiction, we have a lot of Black authors, we have urban romance fiction, we have literary fiction, we have a little bit of everything. So first we're gonna start off with, a lot of these books I don't own, I read from the library. But the first book on my list is How to Save Babylon by Sophia Sinclair. This one I listened to the audiobook and I read on my e-reader, and it was so good. Sophia Sinclair is a Jamaican poet. I knew nothing about her before. I think I found out about this book through the Hot Girl Books. It's a memoir, but it's written very beautifully because she's a poet. So it's written beautifully. I listened to the audiobook, which was a really nice experience because you hear her voice and the cadence that she reads it at, since it's poetry. It reads just like a regular book, but it's just crafted really well. Let me tell you what the book is about. It's a memoir. It's about her life and her experience growing up with her parents in the Rastafarian, I can't remember if it's like a religion or a culture. Reading from her perspective, it was interesting because from the outside looking in, Jamaica is stereotypically known for the locks and the weed and all of that, but in actuality, she was Rastafarian, and there was a lot of discrimination. Like, that's actually not a stereotype that's not, I guess, a correct description of most people that are Jamaican. The people that, practice, that are Rastafarian, actually get made fun of. That's what a lot of the book was talking about, like her experience in school, being made fun of because of the locks and being dirty. And it's about her experience growing up Rastafarian. Interesting to see the reality of her childhood and growing up, and how she made it out of poverty and became a poet and then moved to America and went to school. And it was really beautifully written. I'm a heavy fiction reader, and in 2025 I had a goal to read 12 nonfiction books. I don't think that I met the goal, but I did read some, this being one of them. And I realized that I really like nonfiction where, like, the reason that I like fiction is because a story is being told, the writing is beautiful, and so I like nonfiction where the sentences are crafted and not just written. Like, it's written beautifully, and it makes it easier to keep going in the book. And this was a really beautifully written nonfiction. I loved the audiobook. You hear it in her cadence, the way that she would say it, the accent. It was just beautiful. My next favorite book is The Davenports by Crystal Marquis. So I read, this one is the first one in the series, and I also read the next one, which I think is more than this. And this is a historical fiction, historical romance. I would say historical fiction is my favorite genre, just because I feel like I'm learning about history at the same time, and I'm reading a beautiful story at the same time. So the best way for me to explain this would be, it's Bridgerton / Queen Charlotte, but if it was set in America in the 1940s. Is it 1940s, correct? Is it, nope, 1910. 1910. As you can see, the cover, they're promenading and all of that. So it's about the Davenports. Their dad has acquired wealth, carriage. They're in the carriage business. They own a carriage business. And in this book and the next book, the son is trying to like upgrade the company and, upgrade to cars and motor vehicles and everything. You follow the Davenport sisters and then also two of their friends. It's 1910, so some of them are betrothed to get married, but they are also trying to have careers of their own. One of the girls wants to be a writer, one of them like a fashion designer, one of them a hairstylist. And so you see how they try to make a name for themselves in this world at this time. You do learn, you do get the history piece of what Black people were going through in 1910. It is young adult and there is romance in it, but that doesn't ruin it. I don't read a lot of young adult, and this doesn't. The romance piece of it, you can tell is young adult because of some of the stupid decisions that they make, and just the lack of frontal lobe. That was my introduction to the author. She doesn't, I think these are the only books that she has out, but I can't wait till the third one comes out. I really enjoyed them. The next book that I have to talk about is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. 2025, I really wanted to get my hands on some Claire Keegan, and I did. I think this was the last book that I read in 2025. It was super short, 200 pages or less than 200 pages. Claire Keegan is a really popular Irish author. So Small Things Like These, there's not a whole lot of books that I would recommend to a super wide, like everybody should read this book, but I think everybody should and can read this book and can get something out of it. It's a short novella. It's about this man and his kind of day-to-day life, and he's like kind of living mundane. There's nothing really different. It had themes of religious hypocrisy. It talks a lot about morality. It talks a lot about the people who are supposed to teach you right from wrong, and if they're actually teaching you right from wrong, and being able to use your own moral compass. It talks about immigration in a very small way. Like I said, this book is under 200 pages, and it was the perfect example of using all of your words wisely and using fiction to teach real life lessons. Like I said, not a whole lot of books that I would just recommend to everybody, but I think everybody can get something out of this. And I think everybody should read it, and it's under 200 pages. So just read it. Just read it. It was the last book that I read in 2025 and made my favorite books of 2025. It was amazing. On a completely different note, we have the Capone series. I'm putting all three of them because I read them back to back to back. So it's like this is a romance series. It's like an urban romance. It's love, it's drug lords, it's crime, it's racing. Oh, I made a collage. I'm gonna put the collage, and these are the vibes. These are the vibes of the series. It was so much fun. I think I listened to all of these on audiobook, and like I said, I'm putting all three of them because I listened to them back to back to back. I guess if I had to pick a favorite, it would be the third one. Like, I liked how it wrapped up, but I really can't pick one. I really can't pick one because I just read it back to back to back. It's kind of like Power. There's romance, there's crime, there's drugs, there's clubs, there's like, if I was giving superlatives, this series would be the most fun that I had. It was so good. It was so good, and it was so fun, and I can't wait to continue. So this is like a whole universe. Capone is the first series. There's 3 books. Then there's Capodanno, which is his twin. I think he has 3.5, 4, but I don't know. And then Capri, which is their sister. She has all of her books. And then the rest of the universe. Anyway, it was beautifully written. So much fun. Representative. Cannot wait. Can't wait to read the rest of them. Okay? The next one is The Thing About Home by Rhonda McKnight. This was another one where I saw my family so closely represented. Like, I felt like I was looking in a mirror. About Home by Rhonda McKnight is a romance, but it's actually Christian fiction, which essentially just means that there's not a lot of sex in the book. There's not any. Actually, I think that's what I mean. There's not any. But there is a romance in it, but the romance is not the center of the story at all. So it starts off, I can't remember her name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It starts off, she is renewing her vows, I believe, and her husband doesn't want to renew his vows. And her husband leaves her, doesn't want to renew her vows. That's how the story starts out. And so then she's like lost, and she's trying to find herself. So she goes home, and she never met her dad, I don't believe. And so she goes to South Carolina, one of the Carolinas, to meet his family and learn more about where she's from. And that's where a bulk of the story takes place in South Carolina. You follow her while she gets to know her grandma, while she gets to know her family. They're farmers, they own land, they own a lot of land. You get to see the history. You read about the history of Also, these are Black people. I don't know if I said that. This is a Black family in South Carolina. And so you're learning about the history of Black people in that area, how they acquired this land, how her ancestors acquired this land. You get some of their perspectives. And yeah, you kind of go through her family history a little bit. You follow her as she learns about land. She learns how to garden and how to plant stuff. She gets close to her grandma. She learns the family secrets, everything that her mom hasn't told her. This was like, this is like a soul book for me. It was so like homey. Like, I would say if you needed to get to know me and my family through a book that I have not written, read The Thing About Home. That is the closest thing that you're gonna get. And it was just so sweet and comfortable. And I started Bitter and Sweet, which is another one of Rhonda McKnight's books, and I can't wait to read the rest of them. It was definitely a favorite. This really was the year of like reading. I read more than Black authors, but I read so many books that were just so close to my heart and so close to like who I am. It was an amazing reading year. It was amazing. The next one that I'm going to talk about is another nonfiction. It's Lovely One by Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Look at her. Isn't she so beautiful? I started this one, and look at her sister locks. I started this one on audio, and as soon as I started it, I knew that I wanted to have the book, so I ordered it on Penguin Books, and I loved it. So this is a nonfiction, it's a memoir, and she's not a poet like Safia Sinclair, but she writes really well, and it was another book where, you know, guys, representation really matters. That's all I have to say. Representation really matters, because I saw myself. It was just so nice and fun to see yourself reflected in someone who's a Supreme Court justice, and her writing was good. And yeah, it was just a good story. And you're learning about one of our Supreme Court justices that isn't complete shit. You know, in American politics, it was nice to read this side of American politics, even though it's not strictly about politics. It's about her growing up. You read about her growing up, her going to college at Harvard, her meeting her husband, her you know, she has this really high demand career as a lawyer and as a judge. And so you read about her as a mom and how she balances that. One of her daughters is on the spectrum. One of her daughters is on the autism spectrum, and she talks about how she asked her daughter if it was okay for her to talk about that, and her daughter was like, yes, it's completely fine. Like, I don't think that's something that we should leave out. It's a part of me, and I'm not ashamed of it, so we should talk about it. And it was just really nice. It was nice to kind of humanize some of our politicians and not hate all of our politicians. And so I think you should read this. It was so beautiful. And I buy most of my books used. This is a used book. I got off Penguin Books. But in 2025, I was thinking about like some of my most beautiful books, and a lot of them aren't all that beautiful because some of them are like really beat up. But this was one of the most beautiful that I got in 2025. She's so adorable. And also, at the time that I was reading this, I was considering going to law school. And after reading this, I was still considering it. I have since decided that I'm not going to go to law school. But it was beautiful to read. I loved it. I would highly recommend. The next book on my list is Lonely Castle in the Mirror. I do not quite remember this author's name. Again, I got it from the library, so I don't have it. Suzuki Sugimura. This is a translated fiction. It's translated by Philip Gabriel from Japanese to English. Kind of like magical realism. It's kind of fairy tale-ish. So you're following this girl, and she goes to this lonely castle in the mirror. This is a fictional castle. And she gets there through her mirror. And there she meets all of these other children that you find out later they're all going through their own mental health struggle or struggle at school, being bullied, whatever it is. And so throughout the story, it has like a fairy tale kind of feel to it. There's this wolf queen, and she gives them a task, like find this key and you could be granted whatever, whatever wish you want. They're all kind of trying to figure out, why are we all here? Why do we all have access to this? How are we all connected? They eventually figure it out, and it's so heartwarming. It's so heartwarming to see the friendships of these kids. Like, they're in elementary, middle school, but it doesn't read like an elementary, middle school book. It was so sweet. Children experience things that children should never have to experience, and so it kind of shows you how they deal with it, how they cope with it, what they talk to their other friends about, how they support each other, how children support children through things that children should never experience, but they do. I really liked the friendship of the kids. Also, the parents represented in this book and how they dealt with their children's issues and their mental health and the bullying. I thought it was a good representation of how to deal with it well. Good lessons in parenting. I really like that. That was a common theme in some of the other books one of the other books that I'm going to talk about. Just parenting well. I did cry at the end because it was just so sweet and tender, them taking care of each other. It was just so sweet. That's that one. Okay, now we're doing our top three. Top three. Number 3 is James by Percival Everett. This book was so good. You see it everywhere because it deserves to be everywhere. So this is basically a retelling of Huckleberry Finn, the classic. And it's told from the perspective of Jim, who is the slave in that story. And this book, it's another historical fiction. It is talking about slavery, which I don't love to read books about slavery, but if you're reading books about African Americans, it's sometimes hard to avoid. But this one is from the perspective of somebody who was enslaved, and you're getting like an inside look at slavery. Like, you're getting an inside look at the difference in how they talk to each other and how they talk to the masters. You get to see how they are smarter than they let on to protect themselves. They know that the slave masters their egos are fragile, and they get offended by people who are Black, who are intelligent. What I love the most about this book is the main character cherishing stationery. He talks about like how lucky he is to have a pencil, to have a notebook, to have books, to be able to read. Nobody can ever take that away from you. And as somebody who reads and writes a lot and is into stationery, sometimes it seems like a little silly. Like, it's not silly to me, but I feel like sometimes it looks silly. Like, why are you so obsessed with paper? Why are you so obsessed with books? And this expressed that so well. Like, it expressed so well that at one point my ancestors didn't have access to this, and their wildest dream would be for me to love books, to love reading, to have access to all the books that I have access to be able to write as much as I want, when I want, where I want, to read as much as I want. To for me to even be making this video about my top 10 books, my ancestors weren't even taught. So my ancestors weren't even taught to read at a certain point. It made reading and writing feel like the privilege that it is. Okay, so for example, this quote says, "For the first time in my life, I had paper and ink. I was beside myself. I found a straight stick and shaved it to a point and scratched it on the grove. I put the paper on my lap, dipped my stick into the ink, and wrote the alphabet. I printed letters as I had seen them in books, slowly, clumsily. Then I wrote my first words. I wanted to be certain that they were mine and not some I had read from a book in the judge's library." It talks about things like this is talking about, where does a slave put anger? We could be angry with one another. We were human, but the real source of our rage had to go without address, swallowed, repressed. It just talks about how they keep themselves safe. It says, "The better they feel, the safer we are." February, translate that. The more better they feel, is the most safer we be. Having to not diminish yourself, but minimize yourself. Just imagining like having to minimize yourself that much just to keep yourself safe. you need to read this book. This is another one of those books that I would widely recommend to pretty much everybody, that you should read this and you should get something out of it. If you're a Black person that likes to read and write, I thought this was so special. And like I said, it just really emphasized the privilege of reading and writing as a Black person, as a person in general, but mostly as a Black person. And I just loved it. There were so many quotes from this book. It was a great story. It was kind of a revenge story. There was a lot of action. Definitely recommend. This was my first book by this author, and it will not be my last. Second favorite book of 2025, My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. First of all, this was the first. Look at this book. Look at how there's post-its, it's annotated, it's marked up, like it is a mess. This is how I annotated books at the beginning of the year. This is how I annotated originally. Like, you know, I pick out a few quotes that I liked and everything. And then I read this book, and the writing was so beautiful that I wanted to mark everything. I wanted to mark everything. Like, it got to a point where I was doing my reading journal spread. First of all, I ran out of ink. Second of all, I was like, okay, I'm just rewriting the book, essentially, like the whole book. I'm just rewriting the whole book. So, Elena Ferrante, she is not a ghostwriter, this is her alias. Elena Ferrante is her alias. I think she might have been found out, but I don't know who she is. Elena Ferrante is her alias. This is another translated fiction. This is a series. This is the first to a 4-book series called the Neapolitan series. This series is a coming of age story about 2 girl best friends in Italy. Specifically, they're living in an impoverished neighborhood and kind of how they make it out, their life story, all of that. Why did I like this book? One, on paper, this is not my kind of book. I don't like coming of age stories. I get really bored, especially like teenage coming of age stories. Like, I don't know. I don't want to relive everybody's teenage life and like all of the dramatic thing. Like, I just don't like it. So I think what this does well is it starts when they're in elementary school. So I think I like that better. But also, before I read this book, I read one of Elena Ferrante's short stories or novellas called The Lost Daughter, and that was my introduction to her, because I had heard this is a really popular book. So I had heard about it, and I was like, I don't like coming of age stories. So I don't like coming of age stories. At the time when I read this book, I barely knew what literary fiction was. I had read literary fiction, but I didn't really know what it was. I was like, that just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't sound like something that I would like, but I keep hearing about it in the writing, so I'm interested. So I read a novella last February, and I really liked it. I fell in love with her writing. Elena Ferrante's writing is beautiful. It is amazing. I do feel like it has something to do with the fact that this is translated from Italian to English. I feel like that has a lot to do with the way the sentences are crafted. I don't know if you speak Italian, let me know. But it's definitely both. It's definitely probably the translation, which this is translated by Anne Goldstein, I believe. It's really important to mention, yes, translated by Anne Goldstein. One, there's so many quotes that I kind of memorized just because I read them so many times. There's so many things that she describes and talks about that I've never seen written down, that I didn't know could be put into words, and she put it into words. One of those passages that I read over and over again was about periods, and the character says, I felt at the mercy of obscure forces acting inside of me. And I was like, that's exactly what a period feels like. I felt at the mercy of obscure forces inside of me. Let me go back to like what it actually says so that I make sure I'm not like paraphrasing. Page 96. It's a coming of age, so she's getting her period. She doesn't really know what's going on. So the chapter starts, a period of unhappiness began. I got fat, da 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 da. In school, I worked harder than ever, yet the mathematics problems almost never gave the results expected by the textbook, and the Latin sentences seemed to make no sense. Brain fog. Then I no longer knew who I was. Period. You don't know who you are, you're lost. And this is the sentences that I read over and over again. I cried often without warning. My chest, meanwhile, became large and soft. I felt at the mercy of obscure forces acting inside my body. I was always agitated. That is it. That is exactly how a period feels. That is exactly how terrible PMS, for me personally, I have PMDD. That is exactly how PMDD feels. I felt at the mercy of obscure forces acting inside my body. Just and there, that's just what the whole book was. It was just sentences explaining things in words that are just crafted. I did read the second one in the series last year too, but this one was definitely my favorite, and I have the third and fourth one. But her writing, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. This is literary fiction. This is not one that if you like literary fiction, I would widely recommend, but I'm not going to say that I would recommend this to everybody because it's melancholy. You have to, for me, I'm in it for the writing and the story, but like literary fiction, maybe give it a try. Give the author a try at least. If you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to let me know. It deserves the hype. It deserves, in my opinion, it deserves all the hype that it gets. I'm done. Okay. Last book, my favorite book, my favorite book of 2025. Drumroll, please. It was Beartown by Frederick Bachman. Frederick Bachman, his mind, his craft needs to be studied. A man called Uwe, however you pronounce it. He wrote Anxious People. He wrote the Beartown series. He wrote the Beartown. This is the first book in a series. Last year he released My Friends. He is becoming one of my favorite authors. He has become one of my favorite authors. Top 3, not 3. Like, this man knows what he's doing. So Beartown, this is about a small town called Beartown where hockey is like their thing. It's kind of like in the United States, like a college town where football is the whole thing. Hockey is their whole thing. But the book is not really about hockey. The book, oh my God, how do I explain this book? This book is about friendship. It's about morals. It's about compromise. It's about SA. That is a trigger warning. SA is definitely a huge topic in this book. I don't even feel like I can do this book justice by talking about it, but I do want to show you my reading journal spread because this was my favorite book of the year and it got the best spread, I think, in my reading journal this year. The writing was beautiful. The writing was so beautiful and profound. Everything, like, even if he was talking about something so minor, the way that he talked about it, gorgeous. Even if you don't read Beartown, you need to read Frederick Bachman. I think he's another author that I would widely recommend. I guess we could just do pictures. But, oh, I absolutely love this book. It was themes of, so many themes of, like, huge theme of community. Like, community, what you're willing to sacrifice for your community. Are you going to tell your community when they're wrong? I don't know why it keeps zooming in and I don't know how to stop it. But anyway, this book, I just bought this physical copy a couple weeks ago. I read this, again, from the library on audio and ebook. And I annotated, like, there were so many parts of the audiobook where I tabbed and I annotated in the ebook. And I cried while reading this book. Okay, so what is this book about? This book is about the small town called Beartown. Hockey is their thing. Something happens that jeopardizes their hockey team, and so they have to decide kind of whose side they're going to be on, who they're going to believe, what they're going to stand up for, what they want to be known for. This book, there are scenes that I can see in my head like a movie. this is another example of parents getting it right. Not all of the parents in here, but some of the parents. Like, there were parents in here where I was like, if this situation were to happen to me, that is exactly how I would want my parents to react. It was just so good. I'm not doing this book justice because it's like your favorite book, you can't ever do it justice because you just have so many things, so many good things to say, and most of it can't even really be explained. I'm now continuing the series. There are lines that I remember from this book that now reading the next books are just, it's just like devastating. Benji, this book. All you need to know is like Frederick Bachman's writing. The reason why there's nothing about like a small hockey town that has anything to do with me, but his writing makes it amazing. I've seen some discourse and people don't like it. That ain't got nothing to do with me. Ain't got nothing to do with me. I love it. I love this book. I just finished the second one. Heartbreaking. Absolutely tore me to shreds. Top 3, not 3. My favorite book of the year. And that's it. I had such a good reading year. Those are my top 10 books. Those are my top 10 books. I loved all of them. I got something different out of all of them. I read some beautiful writing. I learned some beautiful stories. 2025 was an amazing reading year, and I can't wait to have another amazing year in 2026. Hopefully this is it and I don't have to come back on here and say anything. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite books are, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.